Hello, welcome back. And if it's your first time joining me here in the garden, I'd like to say hello and welcome you, give you a warm welcome. Um, my name is Vuyi, and this is my secret garden. So, my first sharing was last week, and in that episode, I gave a synopsis of what this channel is going to be about, what the space is going to focus on. And I thought that for this week, it would be a good idea for me to come in and give you a bit more about me, to tell you a little bit about my story and what my life experience has been like, just to contextualize my future offerings and some of the themes that will come up and what I like to think to focus on, right? What I'd like to focus on. I think that, yeah, it makes sense for you to have an idea of the person behind the content that I'll be bringing, just so we can have a little bit more intimacy with each other, realness with each other. And yeah, like I touched on last week, there are certain things that I want to make sure come through in this space. And one of those things is authenticity. So, welcome. Today, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. It's my story and what my experience, what my story has taught me so far about life, about humanness, about, yeah, the truth of being a spiritual being, having this magical human experience, although it doesn't always feel magical. So I was born in Landman Clinic. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. And Landman Clinic is not far from Soweto, and Soweto is southwestern township, which is in the south of Johannesburg. So my formative years were in Soweto. The tone of relationship, love, and community was formed there. There's a helicopter flying overhead. Wait for it. The joys of living in the city. So, yeah, my formative years were in Soweto, at which point we then moved to the suburbs. We were around 6 or 7. And when I say we, I'm a twin. So often my memories and my life were experienced as a we. So yeah, we moved to Midrand, which was the suburbs, one of the suburbs in the north, uh, where very few black people had lived before. So, and historically, this is where we come from, the idea that progression, abundance, and success meant that you stayed in certain areas and gave yourself a certain life was definitely something that's where the decision came from, or partly from my parents, was to give us a better life. And so we moved to Midrand, and Midrand was a predominantly white area. We were the first black family around the vicinity in which we stayed in. And this was a stark difference to where we came from, because where we came from, There was constant noise of laughing children, of children on the street. Beslala, we played with each other, and we all knew each other from like the entire road, and the road this side and the road that side, and you know, you couldn't really act a fool, because every parent, every elder was your mother or was your father, and we belonged to each other. And so now we moved to this place where the walls were tall and you hardly saw anyone in the streets unless they were in a car, and you just saw no children in the street. And it was only, in my late 20s, in my adult life, that I realized what effect that had on me. As you can imagine, it's quite an isolating and traumatizing thing to go from a place where the people around you look like you, uh, believe as you do, in the sense of, love language and the way that we express ourselves. And then moving to a place where, to some degree, you're not necessarily welcomed or wanted there, or your presence brings some sense of discomfort because it's foreign. I'm not going to say that everyone in the area didn't want us there, but I'm sure that it was an unusual experience because it hadn't been done before. So, yeah, and that was a pretty interesting experience for me. It makes me think about my first love, which was a puppy, which is unusual, I suppose, at that point culturally. Is India, dogs were like stay outside, and but I really connected to this to my dog, um, Spooky, and so when we left Soweto, we couldn't find the dog, couldn't find Spooky. We didn't know where it was, where he was, and so we moved without her. And then finally, eventually, we were able to go back to Soweto, and we found it, and she was, oh man, some of her hair had fallen out and she was just not herself, but she definitely recognized us and me, and I was so happy to be reconnected. But one of the days when we started school, she followed us. I am sure she was so afraid that we'd leave her again, but she followed us to school. And because the gate was open and we never saw her again. So that was my kind of introduction to this area. There was a little bit of heartbreak, but as children, when you experience certain things, we don't treat it, um, with the same kind of, the impact of it is quite profound. But because you're a child, you yourself don't communicate just how much it affects you. And I suppose parents are also busy and need to get along with their things and life. So yeah, it was only later that I realized, sure, that was quite a heartbreaking thing for me. She was a poodle, and so for a long time I actually thought poodle dogs were ugly, and I forgot I had a poodle, and I think it was just me blocking out that trauma. And as I share along today and further along with my teachings and stories and yeah, just sharings, I focus a lot on the details of stories, and not from the perspective of wanting to dig, but because there's so many lessons within our story, and my work focuses on the soul song, so our soul and the song our souls came to sing. So when we look at some of these things from our past, they give us a perspective of how we might behave in the now, the reasons for the ways that we behave a certain way, and they also show us our essence and might give us clues as to what our soul came here to remember, our soul came here to do, our soul came here to anchor in. So yeah, so we moved to Midrand. Midrand was an interesting experience. It was, yeah, we were still a pretty close-knit family. The presence of my father was still quite regular. And yeah, so at the time when we moved, it was the four of us. It was myself, my twin sister, my mother, and my father. And then a few years later, my younger brother joined us, who's 7 years older than us. Life took us to the deeper heart of the suburbs. We moved to Parkmore, and that in itself was also another kind of experience because we live in a pretty rich area, but we're not necessarily in that situation. So as a child, the the burden of pretending to be something that you're not, or even the burden of other people projecting on what they assume your life is like, was quite a disorienting thing. And you find yourself trying to create a version of yourself that makes sense for the things that are projected towards you, if that makes sense. So you're trying to appeal to what is assumed about you because of where you live, because of maybe how you might speak like. And yeah, it was an interesting experience moving from Midrand as well to Parkmore, because in Midrand it was a predominantly black school, so people looked like me, and we still spoke Isolo, Soto, we spoke our native tongues. And then we moved to Parkmore, and in Parkmore there was predominantly white children, and there were children who looked like us, but they didn't speak native languages like we did. So again, there's this added pressure to try and figure out who I am. I remember that was when I began to hold my tongue, because I wasn't sure of who I needed to be in this space and whether that person was acceptable or welcome. And so you become more of an observer than you are yourself, because you're trying to decode what it is that is happening around you. We were quite we were quite childlike from the schools that we came from, and coming in, myself and my sister and the children, they were around 12, 11, 12, 13, were quite mature compared to where we had come from. And that was the influence of things like MTV, and pop culture, which had a heavy influence on the children at the school that we were now going to, as opposed to where we came from, where we didn't really even watch TV. We probably did in the evenings with our parents. So the conditioning impressions we got was from Brooke Logan and Sheila. So Days of Our Lives and Bold and Beautiful, and there wasn't much else of that. And it was when we got to this new school that we began to see that, oh, okay, there are behaviors that we were unaware of completely, that other children had, and I didn't know how to navigate that. And so I became there was quite a turmoil that began within me, although I didn't express it. But I discovered drama, which I really loved. And so that was enough for me, and I was happy. I was happy to express myself and to kind of run away in this newly discovered exploration of myself, this craft that gave me access to parts of myself I didn't really know existed. And that's where my passion for expression came from. We later went to high school, and in high school I then really threw myself into arts and culture. I was acting, I was writing plays, directing, and acting in my own plays. I directed music festivals, and I was dancing. I taught myself how to dance ballet. And although I tried to participate in extramural sports, particularly for dancing and yeah, for dancing. It wasn't really. It's quite a Western thing to go and pay someone to teach you a skill, and it was not something that was prioritized or understood, and so that kind of fell away. But it's always something that I felt like I would have loved to even do professionally, or to explore at least um, to that degree. And I loved high school. I really loved high school. I was self-satisfied and I was kind of in my lane. I was doing what I felt was singing my song every morning when I woke up. I remember we lived in a house that had quite a lot of windows and big windows, and I could feel the sun rising. But as the sun rose, I also myself was like, oh, it's a new day, and I really was alive and wanted to live that day fully, you know. And I was quite connected still to what I believe now was the purpose that I came from. I knew that I was here to anchor in something like joy, love, and I knew that it was quite a gift to incarnate as a human and to be able to do the things that I was able to do every day. So for me, that was a very, very exciting time, and I excelled at school, and yeah, even in terms of leadership, in terms of serving. I remember I was part of Interact, which was a charitable organization, and I ran that for a couple of years with ease, and I wasn't overthinking things yet, and the world and judgment and what other people might think of me. I was just, you know, in my song. It was in kind of late high school where I experienced my first. I don't know if I want to call it my first love, because I don't know how to speak on behalf of a teenager now. I was 15, but I experienced my first traumatic experience, and it was a sexual violation, it was sexual trauma, and it was by someone I liked dearly. I had it was someone much older, and I didn't know. I mean, I think at that age you have no idea how to tell between an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 28-year-old, and yeah. So I had this experience that shattered my reality as an innocent, inexperienced young girl, and this violent deflowering took an already kind of withering essence, in the sense that each time I moved into new schools or into a new neighborhood, it felt like I left an aspect of myself behind, and I then had to recreate something that I wasn't always sure about. We also didn't I didn't grow up in a family that spoke. We didn't really speak about things. We didn't talk about our days. We didn't talk about our feelings. We didn't talk about what we were going through. So a lot of what I was grappling with internally, I couldn't soundboard with anybody else, you know. So 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 then I experienced this kind of breaking internally, gradually, and then I have this kind of significant one which happens within me, and takes a big chunk of me. Just, it betrays a huge part of me, and I then began kind of spiraling again internally. I was still Vuyi who smiled and wanted to make people feel included and make people feel happy and all of these things, but inside I was just not myself. I began to experience difficulties being in my body and try to dissociate, and I did this in various ways, one of which was through food. I'd numb myself, And I know this is quite an intense sharing. As I'm talking, I'm noticing that, and I really can't do things. I don't want to lie to myself. All I can be is real, and this is I think where the general projection of humanity is going. And I also understand that there are so many people who have experienced certain things and the truth is still stuck in their throats. And if I can come in as someone who's realized themselves, someone who has overcome wounds I never thought I'd overcome, if I can share myself authentically and completely, then I think that we would be doing good as humans to do that, to let people know that they're not on their own, and that there is no need for us to have shame or guilt about the things that we've experienced. And so that would be my first thing that my life experience has taught me, is that I don't need to be ashamed or to have to hang on to guilt because I've been through certain things. I can look at what I've been through, and I worked on it for decades, you know. I worked on it for decades. This trauma led me to become almost mute and a liar, because it's as if I had to do everything to protect the secret that I kept to myself. I told no one. And I essentially suffered in silence. And then you become a young adult. It happened at 15 and I was turning 16 that same year. And you don't realize that you're changing and that you're beginning to create these walls around yourself, and that your relationships are beginning to suffer, and that your view of your own self is becoming toxic. It's beginning to like rot and come undone. But you're like going ahead, because we don't talk about things that are bad in life. We just go ahead, and there are things to be done. There are careers to be built, and there are degrees to be attained, and all those kinds of things. I remember, um, you know, becoming a young adult, and now, I'm getting attention from guys, and I just don't know how to handle any of that, because I've never really gotten the opportunity to do it organically. And so there was obviously a sense of my feeling unsafe already. And yeah, it was very difficult. And once I lost art, so pursuing the arts further outside of school wasn't something that was encouraged at home. And so I did my best to try and choose a course or something that would kind of, that I'd like, but that would also satisfy my parents to some degree as well, which a lot of us have done and do. But and that was media studies, and I studied radio and journalism, and I liked it. But there's a part of me that always knew that I needed to express myself more freely, from the heart. uh, there was a part of me that knew she was an artist, although it took me, only in the last few years that I've been able to say that, oh, okay, so I express myself in this way, and this is I lean into being an artist. I lean into that because so many aspects of me are just that, emotionally and anyway. But essentially, I began to die within myself. I was working 9 to 5s, and I was working jobs which seemed cool on the surface. Like I mentioned last week, I worked in fashion, I worked in social development for reputable companies or families. But inside, I knew that I was being called by something else. I knew that I was not fulfilled in what I was doing, and I knew that I couldn't continue to live in this world in this way. I knew that it was unsustainable. So although I kind of, um, I did what I needed to do. I compromised and said, okay, this is the life that I'm going to have. There was something in me that was like, no, 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 no. Fast forward, some years later, I got, I began to get sick. And this is the second kind of what life has taught me nugget that I want to share with you is that when we deny the call of our souls, the song of our hearts, that we all know calls to us periodically in our lives, we get sick. We experience what is dis-ease. And I was experiencing the calling. And what the calling is essentially your old life, your old self, your old ways, the avatar, dying, and your soul and your spirit asking for you to rebirth yourself anew and to rebirth yourself as the authentic version of yourself. And that's what happened to me. I experienced intense headaches, migraine headaches for years. For years. They started around 2011, 2012, and progressed and got really, really bad in 2016. And I was working at a job that I thought, oh, it was cool. It was a travel writing job, and I should have been happy, but I internally was dead. I was not okay, and I couldn't pretend anymore. More and more, I spent time sleeping when I wasn't at work, when I was in between travels and between assignments, and yeah, I would pretend, and by the time I got home, I was so exhausted from pretending that all I could do to recover was sleep, and it got quite bad to the point at which I tried to exit the world. I tried to take my own life, and that led me to stay at a mental health facility for a couple of weeks. In there, I met the most amazing souls, the most amazing souls. And the third kind of nugget that I want to share with you is that sometimes you feel like you're alone and that people who are like you do not exist, but I'm telling you they do. They're in pain. They may be in pain like you as well, but they're trying to heal like you, like all of us as well. And once you get to a point where you've reclaimed enough of your parts enough, they will show up. They will show up. And it is us leaning into the experience of what it is to be like ourselves that creates this vortex of joy, this vortex of magnetism, and we magnetize what is meant for us towards us. And when we don't embrace who we are, we essentially block what is meant from us. Yeah, the irony. I got sick. I went into mental health facility and I had such great breakthroughs. I was led to have some medicine journeys and ceremonies, spend time with plant medicine, which also helped me to peel back all of the layers that I put on as who I am. So the avatars was beginning to be dissolved by plant medicine. I then went and I had a journey of being initiated into indigenous knowledge systems and spent time living as my ancestors did, cooking by the fire. I was barefoot for a year and a half, more than that, and washed with cold water during that entire time before the sun rises. I healed my headaches at the grace of trance dancing, so to cleanser, which is traditional dancing as the drum sounds, and it's that kind of rapture of letting the stomping of the feet as they hit the ground declutter and dissolve all of what's blocking your chakra systems, your energy centers, essentially unlocking what's locked in the body to connect you back with the universe, and also being barefoot as you then being healed, and literally your the electricity of your body being recalibrated by Mother Earth. So that was how I began the journey of coming back home to myself. And it's a journey to come home. It's a journey to come home to ourselves. This journey started in mid 2016, and it's only in the last kind of year where I'm like, whew, I feel like I've integrated, not prematurely, truly integrated all of what I've learned, and including the traumas that I encountered in parts of my journey of initiation. I had 3 parts to my journey, and the last aspect, which was in Kuruleni here in Gauteng. So I started in the Eastern Cape, which is like the rural areas, and I spent time with a healer, an indigenous knowledge systems practitioner, but who's also a physiotherapist who studied her ancestors. She's a South African mama, and her ancestors took her to the East. They took her to China to learn acupuncture and Chinese medicine, spend time with the Native Americans, spend time in India, and she helped me to essentially become well after my the first part of my journey. The first part of my journey was very necessary. And I learned a lot, and I reclaimed the kind of primordial part of being human. So being able to look for water when the riverbed is dry, being able to go and get wood so you can make your own food, and essentially learning how to live simply and in unison with nature. The space though wasn't where I was meant to be, and the thing is that when we are in places we aren't meant to be, our bodies tell us, and so the medicine that I was taking began to affect me. And my color, my complexion changed. I lost a lot of weight, and after, I did not want to go back home because I thought this was what was going to fix me. But after I knew pretty early on that I was meant to be here for only a certain amount of time, but it was hard for me to accept that. And who was I to say to the elder that I was with that, I need to go. I didn't know how to verify my own dreams, my own intuition, and my own instructions from my ancestors. So it took me some time. By the time I left, I was just really bad, and my headaches got even worse. So the second part of my journey was spending time with Umama Undlovukazi, who helped me, gain life again, gain strength, gain vitality, and she taught me how to reconnect with my dreams. She gave me certain books to read, and she then kind of activated me into more of my cosmic ancestry, more of the cosmic senses of me. And then the last aspect was to go and Kwasa in Ikuruleni to Umguni Nomdao. And I don't want to go into too much details there, but essentially it was a very traumatizing space. And when I left, I had PTSD. And when I came back, I realized just how far out I was of myself, because that's the thing. When we ascend, or we're doing on a spiritual journey, we believe that we have to leave our bodies. And that's the fourth thing that I want to share with you today, is that healing happens inside the body, ascension happens inside the body, and really it is for us to activate the divinity within ourselves from inside our bodies. Yes, we can reconnect with everything that's out there, the universe, all that is, but it's to bring it all back and make it make sense within us for ourselves, remembering that we're here to be human. We're here to experience this human experience as these divine beings, but that the entire point of it and the magic of it is us actually being human. So it's taken me some time. It broke me, the journey of initially, the journey of healing, the journey of initiation, the journey of spirit. But it taught me a lot. It taught me about discernment, and that sometimes we're so desperate to heal that we're willing to override the intuition that tells us, no, not here. No, not this one. No, not now. It taught me about duality, light and darkness, and that there is darkness, and that the darkness exists. It's a real thing. Life is spiritual in that there is more to this life experience than what we see with the eye. There is an entire happening that we don't see with our eyes, and just because we don't see it doesn't mean that it's not there, and it actually does affect us. And connecting in with the aspects of our spirituality, our spirit, which is our authenticity, which is that deep place that comes from our knowing, our womb, our intuition. When we move from that place, we can navigate from a more true place. And that's the place that allows us to begin to remember what our song and our music is, what our soul's purpose has come to do. And it could be something as simple as, I'm here to spread joy, right? The journey has taught me about patience and faith. You could get a dream, a premonition today that you find is only relevant in 3 years' time. Patience is everything, and patience is there to serve you, because when you're ready for the thing that you think you're ready for, I'm telling you, it'll show up. It'll happen. It's not going to miss you. It's going to find you and it's going to say, hey, remember? Okay, the time is now, the time has come. My journey has taught me that the world is not what we think it is. It's not what we were raised to believe of it. And that true freedom is going to come from us, from me, the individual. The government is not going to give it to me. Medical system is not going to give it to me. The education system isn't going to give it to me. I have to try my best to reconnect with the essence of who I am, for me to know what it is that I've come to express and how to express it, when to express it, and with whom. My journey has taught me that there is a force bigger than me. My journey introduced me to the Holy Spirit, which is the frequency of the Mother, the Divine Mother, and to the Creator, to the quantum realms, to source energy, to God, to whatever name you refer to as your Father, Father, Mother, whatever words resonate with you, Allah, Mwari, Mudimu, all of that energy of creation, of oneness, the great I am, that voice and that spirit, that when you are on your knees and you're having the darkest moments of your life, and there is a presence, a voice that says you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. The one that moves you to tears, but you can't see this force. told me that that energy is so real. And that takes me to the name of the space. I named the space Secret Garden as a kind of salute, um, an ode to the secret garden, the secret place, pardon me, the secret place that is mentioned in the Bible. I'm going to put that quote, that verse over here for you to read. And I named it this because I lost myself for so many years. I hid as something else. I was so afraid of what people thought of me. I was so afraid to even use my voice at some point. I'd stutter. I just wouldn't talk. I couldn't express myself, what I wanted. I couldn't say no when I wanted to say no. And so this space is that space for me, for us. It's a secret place, for us to commune together, for us to pray together, for us to meditate together, or whatever intent together, whatever words you want to supplement it with, that's fine. Unfortunately, we live in a world where religion has triggered us into rejecting certain words, or certain words not sitting right within our spirits, and I'm aware of that. So you can comment down below and let me know what works for you, what doesn't, and what your story is in relation to that. I do want to say that and this is the trajectory and this paradigm shift that we're in as humanity, is us finding the light is pouring in, right? You might have heard of the gamma rays and solar flares. This is literally the sun. And when I say sun, I mean the sun, right? SON and SUN, the sun is pouring into us to kind of reintegrate, reimplant the frequency of Christ consciousness. And so I am moved, am inspired, and I am surrendered to that energy of Christ consciousness, so Christ teachings. And so I will quote sacred texts. I quote the Bible sometimes. I will quote the Quran sometimes. I will quote the Bhagavad Gita sometimes. And essentially, there is one force, one spirit, one radiance that we all speak about when we speak about spirit, when we speak about the Creator. That is the story in a nutshell. In between, I've had some really awesome jobs, and I've learned a lot in this life. I've sold books, I've taught English online, I've been an au pair, I lived in Holland for 1 year. I've worked in fashion, I've been a travel writer, I've cleaned toilets, I've cleaned people's houses. So, yeah, I feel good I'm feeling many things right now. I know it's been a long share, but then again, I'm hoping for those who are okay with listening and being and aren't necessarily looking for a quick fix. This isn't those platforms. I'm here to be real, and this will probably be one of my longest shares ever. But I wanted to establish who I am, a little bit of my story, and to share with you my truth. And so from here on out, you'll have a baseline to come back to when I share certain things about the human condition, about mental health, about suicidal thoughts, suicide, about addiction, about self-love, and the opposite. There were those of us, there are people who still struggle with self-loathing. And so, yeah, I look forward to also seeing and being witness to what I'm guided to create and share here for us as we all endeavor to walk ourselves home and walking each other home. We are working to remember our true essence, our true songs, and yeah, may we remember our true songs. In us remembering our true songs, I know for sure that we will then change the trajectory of our shared human experience and our collective reality. We have that power amongst us. So that's my story and some of the things that I've come to learn. I hope that, of course, I still have a little bit of nerves about even being on this platform and sharing myself so freely, right? And so boldly and so vulnerably. But yeah, this is what it is. Thank you for being here. I hope that something resonated and that you'll stay by subscribing and liking and commenting. That helps me cement my place in this space, and my hope is that I can focus more and more on this aspect of what I do, the work that I do, so that enough people can learn from what I've come to learn. I want to say that you're probably doing far better than you think you are. And I know it's a very tricky time right now. I hope you're being soft with yourself, and I hope you remember that the only thing that's really real is this very moment, this right now. Nothing else matters. And if it's all you can handle, do that. Lean into your breath. And keep coming to this place when things get overwhelming. Next week, I'll share some of the things that have helped to sustain me along my spiritual journey and my journey of awakening and remembering who I am. Thank you for being here. Bye bye.